When a millionaire father forces his son to marry the family gardener, he believes he has successfully forced his son's obedience. However, as time goes on, the son and the gardener grow closer, slowly falling in love. What they didn't expect was the shocking truth that the father had been manipulating their every move. What happens next will leave you astounded. If you haven't subscribed yet, do so now. You won't want to miss how this story unfolds. The Whitmore estate sprawled across 40 acres of perfectly manicured lawns, marble fountains, and towering hedges that lined the pristine driveway. It was the kind of place one only saw in magazines, an outward display of luxury that whispered power and affluence. Inside the main mansion, the scent of old money hung in the air, heavy with the pressure of reputation. At the head of this kingdom was James Whitmore, a man whose sharp gaze could silence an entire boardroom. His tailored suits and perfectly combed gray hair projected an image of a man who had fought hard to reach the top. James was not born into privilege. Every brick of his empire had been laid with his own ambition and iron will. He never forgot the poverty of his youth, and his obsession with maintaining appearances was his way of ensuring that his family would never experience the shame he once knew. James's 25-year-old son, Alex Whitmore, was a different story entirely. Spoiled and handsome, with dark hair that always looked artfully tousled and a wardrobe of designer brands, Alex had grown up insulated by his father's success. His days were spent attending parties, driving flashy sports cars, and surrounding himself with shallow friends who loved his money more than his company. He walked through life without purpose, carrying an air of entitlement that made even the house staff roll their eyes behind his back. The evening began like most others at the Whitmore estate, a lavish party teeming with guests in expensive gowns and tailored tuxedos. The chandeliers in the grand ballroom spilled golden light over the marble floors, and glasses of champagne never went empty. The orchestra played softly in the corner, the music blending with laughter and chatter. James stood near the entrance, shaking hands with influential businessmen and politicians. He spotted Alex across the room, laughing a little too loudly with a group of his usual friends. With a glass of whiskey in hand, James watched his son with quiet disappointment. Near the back of the garden, where the party lights faded into darkness, Lily Dawson worked quietly. She was small and unassuming, dressed in a simple pair of jeans and a work shirt that marked her as part of the estate staff. Her auburn hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, wisps falling around her face as she knelt to trim some roses that had begun to overgrow. She wasn't supposed to be working during the party, but an earlier request for fresh-cut flowers had pushed her to the garden after sundown. Lily moved with quiet efficiency, her hands rough and calloused from years of tending plants, but there was a certain grace to her that went unnoticed by most. From across the garden, Alex's group stumbled toward her, laughing boisterously. Glasses clinked, and their voices carried louder than necessary. Lily kept her eyes down and her focus on the roses, hoping they would pass without trouble. "Hey!" Alex's voice rang out, slurred from too many drinks. "Isn't this the gardener?" Lily froze. Slowly, she turned to face the group, wiping her hands on her jeans. Alex stood in the center of his friends, a cocky smirk on his face, one hand stuffed into his pocket. "Good evening, Mr. Whitmore," she said politely, trying to remain professional. Alex let out a mocking laugh. "Mr. Whitmore, so formal." His friends snickered. "Tell me, how much do we pay you to crawl around in the dirt all day?" Lily's face burned, but she said nothing. She wasn't naive. Working for the wealthy often meant being invisible, and she had grown used to the condescension. "You know," Alex continued, gesturing toward her, "you could have dressed up. The roses don't care how fancy you look, but at least you wouldn't be embarrassing my father's guests." The comment stung. Lily looked him in his eye for the first time that night, and something in her calm expression made Alex pause. Her voice was steady when she finally spoke. "I'm here because I was asked to prepare flowers for the party, Mr. Whitmore. If that embarrasses you, perhaps you should speak with whoever requested them." The silence that followed was deafening. From the balcony overlooking the garden, James Whitmore had seen the entire exchange. His jaw tightened as he watched his son stagger back toward the party, his laughter cutting through the night. The young man's arrogance disgusted him. The next morning, the air in the Whitmore mansion was thick with tension. James sat in his office, sipping coffee as Alex walked in, unbothered and dressed in a casual designer sweater. "What's up, Dad? I've got plans." "Sit down." The edge in James's voice left no room for argument. Alex dropped onto one of the leather chairs, frowning. "What happened last night in the garden," James began, his tone low and controlled, "was unacceptable." Alex rolled his eyes. "Oh, come on. It was just a joke. She's a gardener. Why do you care?" "Because of your attitude," James said, standing to his full height. "You live off my money, flaunt my success, and yet you show nothing but arrogance and disrespect for people who work hard for a living. People like Lily Dawson." Alex scoffed. "This is ridiculous." "Quiet!" James thundered. He leaned over the desk, fixing his son with a glare that had once terrified entire boardrooms. "If you want to continue living under my roof and spending my money, you will marry her." Alex's face went pale. "What?" "You heard me," James said, his voice ice cold. "You will marry Lily Dawson." The words hung in the air like a bombshell. Alex shot out of his chair. "This is insane. You can't be serious? Marry the gardener?" "I've never been more serious," James replied. "You'll learn what humility looks like, and you'll respect hard work, even if I have to force it down your throat." "What if I refuse?" Alex spat, his voice trembling with anger. James sat back, folding his arms. "If you refuse, you'll leave this house with nothing. No money, no cars, and no position in my business. You'll find out what it means to struggle." The weight of his father's words slammed into Alex like a punch. His eyes darted around the office, as though searching for a way out. "You can't do this," he muttered. "Oh, I can," James said calmly. "And I will." Across the estate, Lily was trimming some shrubs near the fountain when she was summoned to the main house. Her hands were still smudged with dirt when she stepped into the grand office and found both Whitmore men staring at her. James greeted her with a calm nod. "Lily, please sit down. There's something we need to discuss." Confused, Lily perched on the edge of a chair. "Is something wrong, sir?" James leaned forward. "I'll get straight to the point. My son, Alex, will be asking you to marry him." Lily blinked, certain she had misheard. She looked at Alex, who was glaring daggers at his father. "I'm sorry." "What?" "It's not a choice," James added. "I'll make sure you're well compensated for the arrangement, but this marriage will happen." Lily's heart pounded in her chest. She turned to Alex, who looked as horrified as she felt. "But why?" "That's not your concern," James said sharply. "You have my offer." "I can't do this," Lily stammered, rising to her feet. "Think about it," James replied. "For you, for your family, it could change your life." Lily left the room feeling like the walls were closing in. Alex, still frozen in place, whispered under his breath, "What the hell just happened?" The days that followed were a blur of confusion and tension. For Lily, it was as though she were living someone else's life, a strange, twisted fairy tale where she was forced to play the unwilling bride. She spent her nights tossing and turning, replaying James Whitmore's words in her head. It could change your life. What life? Her life had been simple, grounded in hard work, independence, and pride. The Whitmore estate had been her sanctuary, a place where she could lose herself in the earth and flowers she loved so much. Marrying Alex Whitmore felt like a cruel punishment she didn't deserve. For Alex, the humiliation was unbearable. Word had begun to spread among his friends and across town. He could only imagine what the headlines would say if the press got hold of this. "Millionaire heir marries the gardener." His pride wouldn't allow him to see the situation for anything other than a power play by his father. Alex felt trapped, cornered in a chess match where James Whitmore controlled every move. He couldn't stand the idea of losing his wealth and status, of walking away with nothing. Yet the thought of marrying Lily, the very woman he had embarrassed, made his skin crawl. On the third day after James's ultimatum, Alex stormed into the garden where he found Lily kneeling in the dirt, tending to a patch of lilies. She wore her usual jeans and boots, a smear of soil across her forehead. She looked so at peace that Alex's irritation flared even more. "This is all your fault," he snapped. Lily paused, glancing up at him with quiet surprise. "Excuse me?" Alex crossed his arms. You must have done something, said something to my father, to make him pull this stunt. Lily stood, brushing the dirt off her hands. You really think I'd do that? She asked calmly. You humiliated me in front of your friends, and now you think I'm plotting to marry you? Why else would he pick you? Alex shot back, his voice laced with anger. Lily's face hardened, and for the first time, Alex saw a flash of steel in her eyes. I don't want to marry you, Alex Whitmore, she said firmly. Your father has power over both of us, and that's the only reason we're here having this conversation. Her words hit him harder than he expected. Alex opened his mouth to reply, but found nothing to say. Later that evening, Lily sat alone in the small cottage she rented on the edge of the estate. The cozy home had always been her escape from the chaos of the world, but now it felt suffocating. She picked up the phone and dialed her older sister Grace, the only family she had left. Grace lived hours away in a cramped apartment with her 2 kids, struggling to make ends meet. You what? Grace's voice crackled through the line. I didn't say yes, Lily clarified quickly, but James Whitmore is insisting on it. Lily, this is insane. That family's trouble. You don't owe them anything. You can't let them control you like this. Lily sighed, leaning her forehead against her hand. It's not that simple, Grace. He offered financial security. Enough for me to help you and the kids. Enough to change everything. Grace's voice softened. I don't want you sacrificing yourself for us, Lily. I'm not, Lily lied quietly. In truth, part of her felt trapped. If she refused, she'd likely lose her job and the little stability she had managed to build. But if she agreed, she couldn't even picture what life would look like as Alex's wife. The following morning, Alex and Lily were summoned to James's office. The tension in the room was so thick, it felt like a storm waiting to break. James sat behind his massive mahogany desk, his steely eyes fixed on the 2 of them as they stood awkwardly before him. Well, he said, his voice cutting through the silence. Lily took a steadying breath and spoke first. I'll do it, she said quietly. Alex turned to stare at her, his mouth falling open. What? James gave the faintest nod of approval. Good. You've made a wise decision. I'm not doing this for you, Lily added, looking James in the eye. And I'm not doing it for him either. James's mouth twitched in something that might have been a smile. As long as it gets done, your reasons don't matter to me. Alex spun toward Lily, his voice low and furious. You can't seriously. Stop! James's voice thundered across the room, silencing them both. This is happening. You'll be married within the week. I expect you both to act accordingly. Alex stared at his father, seething. You're insane, he muttered before storming out of the room. Lily turned to follow, her face pale, but James stopped her with a single word. Wait. She turned back reluctantly. James regarded her for a long moment before speaking. You may not realize it yet, but this marriage will be good for you both. Lily frowned, her voice tinged with disbelief. Good for us? You're forcing 2 people who barely know each other, and who can't stand each other, into a marriage. What part of that is good? James leaned back, his gaze unwavering. Sometimes, people don't grow until they're forced to. Lily didn't reply. She left the office with her heart pounding, feeling like she'd just signed her life away. The ceremony took place that Saturday, an affair so small and rushed it barely felt real. James had insisted on a quiet, private service to avoid media attention, so the guest list was limited to a handful of close business associates and a priest who asked no questions. Lily wore a simple white dress, not the kind brides dream of, but something she had borrowed from a friend. Her hair was down in loose waves, framing her face, and though she looked beautiful, there was no joy in her expression. Alex stood stiffly beside her, wearing a dark suit that fit him perfectly but felt like a noose. He refused to look at her, his jaw tight, his thoughts elsewhere. The vows were spoken in monotone voices. The rings, simple gold bands James had chosen, were exchanged with trembling hands. By the time the priest pronounced them husband and wife, the room felt colder than when they had entered. You may kiss the bride, the priest said. Alex hesitated for only a second before leaning in and brushing the faintest kiss against Lily's cheek. She didn't flinch, but she didn't smile either. As they walked out of the small chapel together, side by side but worlds apart, Alex muttered under his breath, "This doesn't change anything." Lily glanced at him, her voice soft but firm. "It changes everything." The Whitmore estate, vast as it was, felt far too small once Lily and Alex returned as husband and wife. James Whitmore had made it clear. Lily would move into the main house, and the newlyweds were to live under the same roof, an arrangement that suited neither of them. Lily was given a bedroom on the second floor, just across the hall from Alex's. It was elegant, with cream-colored walls, a four-poster bed, and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the sprawling gardens she once worked in. To anyone else, it would have seemed luxurious. To Lily, it felt suffocating. She spent the first morning unpacking the few belongings she had brought from her tiny cottage: worn jeans, a pair of gardening gloves, and a collection of old novels she treasured. They looked laughably out of place against the grandeur of her new room. Alex, meanwhile, avoided her as much as possible. He had taken up residence in his father's study, pacing restlessly or scrolling through his phone, venting to friends who still couldn't believe what had happened. "You're actually married to the gardener?" his friend Brent asked over the phone, barely containing his laughter. "Yeah, hilarious," Alex muttered. "My dad's insane." "Why don't you just leave, man? Walk away." Alex ran a hand through his hair. "And give up everything? My inheritance? The company? No chance." Later that day, the two crossed paths in the hallway, an awkward silence stretching between them as Alex exited his room just as Lily emerged from hers. "Morning," Lily said coolly. Alex looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Don't pretend this is normal," he said before walking past her. Lily watched him disappear down the stairs, her fists clenching. Normal. Did he think this was easy for her? The first meal they shared was predictably disastrous. James had insisted they eat breakfast together at the long dining table, a table that could comfortably seat 20 people, but now felt unnecessarily cavernous with only the three of them. Lily sat at one end, Alex at the other, and James at the center, sipping his coffee and flipping through the morning paper as though this were any other day. A maid served eggs, toast, and fresh fruit, but no one touched their food. The silence stretched unbearably until Alex finally broke it. "This is ridiculous." James didn't look up. "Speak clearly, Alex." "I said this is ridiculous." Alex pushed his plate away. "You're acting like this whole thing is normal, like we're some picture-perfect family." "Then act like it," James replied evenly, turning a page. Alex scoffed. "Oh, sure. Should we hold hands and sing songs too? You think forcing us together is going to change anything?" Lily stared at her plate, trying to remain invisible. She wasn't about to get dragged into their argument. James finally lowered the paper and looked at his son. "Change doesn't happen overnight, Alex. You may not see it now, but you will." "I won't," Alex snapped, rising from his chair. He shot Lily a cold glance before leaving the room. "I'm not playing this game." Lily, left alone with James, finally looked up. He studied her for a moment before speaking. "He'll come around." Lily bit her lip, her voice low. "I don't think he wants to." James smiled faintly, as though he knew something she didn't. "Sometimes we don't know what we need until it's right in front of us." Lily didn't reply, but as she rose to leave, she couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that James was far more calculating than she had realized. In the days that followed, Lily tried to keep her distance from Alex and the suffocating atmosphere of the mansion. She sought refuge in the place that had always brought her peace: the gardens. She spent hours pruning roses, replanting shrubs, and weeding flower beds. The smell of soil and the feel of it beneath her fingers was grounding, familiar in a way nothing else about her new life was. It wasn't long before Alex noticed. From the window of his study, he could see her crouched in the dirt, working with the same quiet focus she'd always had. He would watch her sometimes without realizing it, a flicker of curiosity breaking through his frustration. One afternoon, Alex finally confronted her. He found her kneeling beside a row of lavender, the sun setting in golden streaks across the garden. "Why are you still doing this?" he asked, his tone sharper than intended. Lily didn't look up. "Doing what?" "This." He gestured toward the plants. "Gardening. You're not a servant anymore." Lily finally met his gaze, her expression calm. I wasn't a servant before. This is my work. I love it. Alex frowned. But you don't have to do it. That doesn't mean I shouldn't. She turned back to the lavender, brushing her fingers gently over the purple blossoms. Just because I'm stuck in this house doesn't mean I have to lose who I am. Her words lingered in Alex's mind long after he left the garden. Over time, small interactions began to thaw the ice between them. It wasn't intentional, and neither of them welcomed it at first. But the awkward silences gave way to short conversations, usually barbed, but conversations nonetheless. One evening, Alex wandered into the kitchen late at night, searching for something to eat. He found Lily there, sitting on the counter with a book in her lap and a cup of tea in her hand. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, surprised by the casualness of his own tone. "Not really." She glanced at him as he rummaged through the fridge. "You won't find much in there." He pulled out a half-empty carton of milk, sniffed it, and grimaced. "What kind of mansion doesn't have snacks?" Lily couldn't help but laugh, a soft, unexpected sound. "There's bread and jam in the pantry." Alex looked over at her, something flickering in his expression. "You're weirdly comfortable here." "I wouldn't say that," she replied quietly. He grabbed the bread and jam and sat at the table, glancing at her. "So, what's the book?" She hesitated for a moment before holding it up. "Pride and Prejudice." Alex raised an eyebrow. "Figures. What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing." He smirked, spreading jam onto a slice of bread. "Just the stubborn heroine and the arrogant rich guy. Sounds familiar?" Lily rolled her eyes, but there was a ghost of a smile on her lips. "This isn't a romance novel, Alex." "Good," he replied, "because this would be a terrible romance." Lily laughed softly again, and for a brief moment, the tension between them lessened. Over the next few weeks, something strange began to happen. The icy hostility between Alex and Lily, once so fierce, began to melt, slowly, almost imperceptibly. At first, the change came in the form of small, fleeting moments. A shared glance, a sarcastic remark met with laughter instead of scorn. They were both careful, neither willing to admit the truth, but the walls they had built were starting to crack. For Alex, it was unsettling. He was still angry. Angry at his father, at Lily, at the ridiculous circumstances that had put him here. Yet, as much as he tried to cling to that resentment, it became harder with every passing day. It wasn't Lily's fault, after all. She wasn't cunning or manipulative like he had assumed. She was honest, too honest sometimes, and fiercely independent. She was the complete opposite of the people Alex had spent his life surrounded by. And that's what confused him the most. One afternoon, Alex came home earlier than usual. He had spent the morning at his father's office, trying to prove he was still worthy of inheriting the Whitmore empire, despite being forced into this sham of a marriage. When he walked into the house, he was greeted by something he didn't expect, the faint sound of humming. He followed the sound into the kitchen, where he found Lily baking, flour smudged across her cheek, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail. She was humming to herself as she kneaded dough on the counter, completely oblivious to his presence. For a moment, Alex just watched her, taken aback. She looked so at ease, as though she belonged here. It was the first time he'd seen her smile since the wedding. "What are you doing?" Lily jumped, her humming abruptly stopping as she turned to face him. "You scared me." Alex leaned against the door frame, his arms crossed. "You're baking?" Lily wiped her hands on her apron, shrugging. "I like to bake. It's calming." "Since when do you bake in my kitchen?" "Since I live here now," she shot back, a hint of defiance in her voice. Alex didn't know how to respond to that. He glanced at the bowl of dough, then back at her. "What are you making?" "Bread," she said simply. "I figured it would be nice to have something homemade for once." He raised an eyebrow. "Don't the staff handle that?" Lily shook her head. "You're so used to people doing everything for you, aren't you?" "Is that a problem?" "It's just sad," Lily replied honestly, her tone softer than before. "You're surrounded by everything you could ever want, but you don't know how to do anything for yourself." The words hit Alex harder than he expected. He opened his mouth to retort, but for once he didn't have anything to say. Instead, he muttered, "Fine. Let me know when it's ready," and left the kitchen, his thoughts in turmoil. A week later, James Whitmore approached Lily with a proposal. "I've noticed the East Garden has been neglected for years," he said over breakfast, as Lily sipped her tea. "I'd like you to restore it." Lily paused mid-sip, surprised. "The East Garden?" "Yes," James nodded. "It was my late wife's favorite place. I think it's time to bring it back to life." Lily glanced at him skeptically. She wasn't naive. James Whitmore didn't strike her as a sentimental man. "Why are you asking me to do this?" "Because you're the only one I trust to handle it," he replied smoothly. Lily hesitated, but eventually nodded. "I'll do it." James smiled faintly. "Good. I'll ensure you have whatever tools or staff you need." That afternoon, Lily went to inspect the East Garden. She had heard rumors about it during her time as a gardener, how James's wife, Eleanor Whitmore, had poured her heart into creating a beautiful, secluded paradise before her sudden death. But now, the garden was little more than an overgrown mess. Weeds had taken over the flower beds, ivy crept up the walls, and a once beautiful fountain stood cracked and dry at the center. As Lily knelt to inspect the damage, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she found Alex watching her with his usual guarded expression. "What are you doing here?" "Restoring the East Garden," she replied. "Your father asked me to." Alex frowned, glancing around. "Why? No one's touched this place in years." "Maybe it's time someone did," Lily said simply. Alex studied her for a moment before sighing. "You can't do this alone. It'll take months." "Then I'll take months." "You're stubborn, you know that?" Lily looked up at him with a small, challenging smile. "So I've been told." To Lily's surprise, Alex showed up the next morning, dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, holding a pair of gloves. "What are you doing here?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. "I'm helping," he said gruffly. "Don't make a big deal out of it." Lily stared at him for a moment before shrugging. "Suit yourself." The first day was awkward. Alex clearly had no idea what he was doing, fumbling with tools and complaining about the heat. Lily couldn't help but laugh as she watched him struggle to dig up a stubborn root. "This is ridiculous," Alex grumbled, wiping sweat from his forehead. "How do you do this every day?" "It's called hard work," Lily teased. "You should try it more often." Alex shot her a glare but didn't respond. Instead, he kept digging, determined not to let her see him give up. By the end of the day, they were both exhausted, covered in dirt, and sore in places they didn't know existed. But as they sat on the edge of the cracked fountain, drinking water from plastic bottles, something shifted between them. "You didn't have to help," Lily said softly, glancing at him. Alex shrugged. "I didn't have anything better to do." Lily smirked. "That's the closest thing to a thank you I'll get, isn't it?" "Don't push your luck." For the first time since their marriage, the silence between them wasn't tense or hostile. It was comfortable. Days turned into weeks, and the East Garden began to transform. With Lily's expertise and Alex's reluctant help, the weeds were cleared, the soil was tilled, and flowers began to bloom once more. Alex surprised Lily with his persistence. Though he complained often, he kept showing up, every morning, like clockwork. And slowly, the guarded, bitter man she had married began to soften. One afternoon, as they worked side by side planting roses, Alex glanced at Lily and said, "You know, you're not what I thought you were." Lily paused, looking at him curiously. "And what did you think I was?" He hesitated, his expression unreadable. "I don't know, but not this." Lily smiled faintly. "Well, you're not as bad as I thought you were either." Alex let out a short laugh. High praise. For the first time, he smiled back at her, a real smile, not the sarcastic smirk she was used to. Neither of them said it out loud, but they both felt it. Something was changing. The weeks stretched into months, and the East Garden was nearly unrecognizable. It was no longer an overgrown mess, but a place of beauty and peace. Rows of lavender lined the walkways, roses climbed trellises, and fresh green hedges shaped the garden's borders. The cracked fountain had been restored, its gentle trickle of water a constant, soothing backdrop. The changes in the garden mirrored the changes between Alex and Lily. Where once there was hostility, There was now quiet camaraderie. Where silence had been suffocating, it was now companionable. For Alex, the transformation unsettled him. He had spent so long resenting Lily, believing she was a pawn in his father's schemes. But the more he worked with her, the more he saw her for who she truly was. A woman with strength, warmth, and quiet resolve. And he admired her for it. One evening, Alex and Lily sat on the garden bench under the moonlight. They were both exhausted after a full day of work, their hands dirty but their hearts lighter than they'd been in months. Alex glanced at Lily, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the moon. She looked peaceful, almost happy. "This place looks incredible," Alex admitted, breaking the silence. Lily smiled softly. "It's coming together. You really love this, don't you? Gardening, I mean." "I do," Lily said, leaning back against the bench. "I think it's because plants are honest. They only need the right care to thrive. There's no pretense, no games, just patience and effort." Alex stared at her, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "I envy that." Lily turned her head, surprised. "What do you mean?" Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. "My whole life, I've been surrounded by lies, fake friends, people pretending to care about me, about my family. It's exhausting." Lily's voice was soft. "Is that why you're so angry all the time?" Alex let out a humorless laugh. "Maybe." He paused, looking at her. "When my father forced me to marry you, I thought it was just another game, another manipulation. But you're different." Lily met his gaze, her heart beating faster than she liked. "Different how?" "You're real." The words hung between them like an unspoken promise. For the first time, Alex Whitmore wasn't hiding behind sarcasm or arrogance. He was being honest. Lily didn't know how to respond. Part of her wanted to pull away, to guard herself against the feelings she knew were starting to take root. But another part of her, a quieter part, wanted to believe him. So instead of replying, she looked up at the stars and whispered, "I think everyone deserves something real." Alex didn't reply, but the look in his eyes said everything. Their days fell into a rhythm. Mornings were spent in the garden, their banter growing easier and their silences more comfortable. Afternoons were quieter, with Alex often leaving for meetings at the office while Lily read or baked in the kitchen. And then there were the evenings. Some nights, Alex would find Lily sitting on the balcony, a book in her lap, and a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. He began joining her, bringing a glass of wine or a cup of coffee as they talked about everything and nothing at all. Alex surprised her with how much he knew about the world. He told her about his travels, his business ventures, and the pressures of being James Whitmore's son. In return, Lily shared stories of her childhood, how she grew up in a small house with parents who loved her but had little money, how she discovered her love for plants at a young age and worked her way up to becoming the Whitmore's gardener. "You're lucky," Alex said one night, his voice quiet, "to have grown up with that kind of love." Lily looked at him. "And you didn't?" Alex hesitated before answering. "Not really. My mother died when I was young. My father, he was always more of a businessman than a parent." Lily frowned. "I'm sorry." Alex shrugged, but his tone betrayed him. "It is what it is." For the first time, Lily saw the boy behind the man, the child who had grown up in a house full of wealth but devoid of warmth. It made her see Alex in a different light, and it softened something in her. One evening, James Whitmore surprised them both by calling for a formal family dinner. Lily wore a simple green dress James had insisted she buy, and though it wasn't extravagant, it suited her perfectly. Alex, for once, seemed at ease in his tailored suit. The three of them sat at the long dining table, but this time, the atmosphere was different. The tension that had once defined their meals was gone, replaced by a strange sense of normalcy. James looked between his son and Lily, a small smile playing on his lips. "The garden is looking spectacular. You two have done excellent work." Lily nodded politely. "Thank you." Alex, however, narrowed his eyes. "What's this about, Dad? You don't compliment people without an agenda." James chuckled. "Can a man appreciate his family's accomplishments?" Alex scoffed but didn't push the matter. As dinner continued, James observed the two of them closely. He saw the way Alex looked at Lily when he thought no one was watching, the flicker of something more than respect in his eyes. He noticed the way Lily no longer seemed guarded around his son, her laughter coming easily now. When dinner ended, James stood and clinked his glass. "To new beginnings," he said, his tone deliberate. Alex and Lily exchanged a glance, unsure of what he meant, but they both raised their glasses and echoed the words. To new beginnings. Later that night, Alex found himself back in the garden. He stood in the center, surrounded by the flowers they had planted and the fountain they had restored. The moonlight bathed everything in silver, and for the first time in his life, Alex felt at peace. Lily appeared beside him, her footsteps soft on the stone path. "You couldn't sleep either?" she asked. Alex shook his head. "I just wanted to see this place." Lily smiled, looking around. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Alex turned to her, his expression unguarded. "Yeah, it is." But he wasn't looking at the garden. Lily's breath caught in her throat as their eyes met. She could see it, the shift that had been building for weeks. This wasn't the arrogant, angry man she had married. This was someone else, someone who had changed. Alex stepped closer, his voice low. "Lily, I know this marriage started as a joke, as something neither of us wanted, but it's not a joke to me anymore." Lily's heart pounded. "Alex, I don't know what this is yet," he continued, "but I know I don't want to lose it. I don't want to lose you." Lily looked up at him, her emotions warring inside her. She wanted to believe him, to trust him, but the scars of the past held her back. "Don't say things you don't mean," she whispered. "I mean every word," Alex replied firmly. For a moment, they just stood there, the tension between them crackling like electricity. And though neither of them said it, they both knew the truth. Something had changed. Something real had begun to grow. The days after Alex's quiet confession in the garden passed in a blur. Both he and Lily were careful, almost tiptoeing around each other, as though they were afraid to shatter whatever fragile thing had begun to grow between them. But the tension was undeniable. Every glance lingered too long. Every conversation carried an unspoken weight. Neither of them said it, but they both knew. Something had shifted, and neither of them could go back to the way things were. One afternoon, as Lily worked alone in the garden, James Whitmore approached her. She had grown used to his occasional visits, but this time felt different. His steps were deliberate, his expression unreadable as he stood watching her. "You've done a remarkable job here, Lily," James said finally, his voice calm. "Thank you, sir," Lily replied politely, wiping the sweat from her forehead. James studied her for a moment, his piercing gaze making her shift uncomfortably. "You've proven yourself to be quite capable, more than I expected, to be honest." Lily frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" James stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You've done well, but don't forget your place, Lily." Her stomach twisted at the words. "Excuse me?" "I'm glad to see that my son has warmed up to you," James continued smoothly, ignoring her question. "But remember why you're here. This marriage serves a purpose, and I won't have you overstepping." Lily's hands clenched into fists. "What exactly are you trying to say, Mr. Whitmore?" James smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm saying you'd do well to remember that this isn't a fairy tale. My son has a future, and it doesn't include you. Don't get too comfortable." Lily felt as though she had been punched in the stomach. For weeks she had allowed herself to believe that things might be different, that Alex's words in the garden had been genuine. But James's cold reminder brought her crashing back to reality. "Understood," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. James nodded, satisfied. "Good." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Lily standing alone among the flowers she had so carefully nurtured. That evening, Alex found Lily on the balcony, her back to him as she stared out at the sprawling estate. He could sense something was wrong the moment he saw her, the way her shoulders were tense, her posture rigid. "Lily?" he said softly, stepping closer. She didn't turn around. "What do you want, Alex?" He frowned, taken aback by the coldness in her voice. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Don't lie to me." Lily turned to face him then, her eyes blazing. "Why does it matter, Alex? Why do I matter? Your father's made it perfectly clear where I stand in all of this." Alex's brows furrowed. "What are you talking about?" "Your father," she snapped. "He came to see me today. He told me to remember my place, because apparently I'm just some insignificant gardener who got lucky." Anger flashed in Alex's eyes. "He said that to you?" "Yes." Lily's voice broke slightly, but she swallowed hard and pressed on. "And he's right, isn't he? This marriage, it was never supposed to mean anything. I was just a punishment for you." Alex took a step toward her, his expression fierce. "No, that's not true." "Isn't it?" Lily shot back. "You didn't want this, Alex, and neither did I. We're just pawns in your father's game." Alex's hands clenched at his sides. "It's not a game to me anymore, Lily. You know that." Lily shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes. "I don't know what to believe anymore." "Believe me," Alex said, his voice softening. "I care about you, Lily. I don't know when it happened, but it did. You're not just my father's gardener. You're my wife, and you matter to me." Lily stared at him, torn between her heart and her head. She wanted to believe him, desperately, but James's words echoed in her mind like a cruel reminder of reality. "Then prove it," she whispered. Alex looked at her, his jaw tight. "I will." The next morning, Alex confronted his father. "What did you say to her?" he demanded, storming into James's office. James looked up from his desk, unbothered by Alex's anger. "To whom?" "Lily," Alex snapped. "You told her to remember her place. Why?" James sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Because it needed to be said." Alex's fists clenched. "You had no right." "I have every right," James replied coolly. "I'm protecting you, Alex. That girl doesn't belong in your world, and you know it. You don't get to decide that." James's expression hardened. "You think this marriage is real? That it can last? She's a gardener, Alex, a nobody. You're a Whitmore. You have responsibilities, a reputation to uphold." Alex stared at his father, his anger boiling over. "You're wrong." "Am I?" James countered. "Do you really think she loves you? Or do you think she's simply taking advantage of the situation? After all, a marriage to you is the opportunity of a lifetime." Alex's mind reeled. "She's not like that." James leaned forward, his voice soft and cutting. "Then why don't you ask her? Ask her why she really agreed to marry you. You might not like the answer." Alex stormed out of the office, his father's words gnawing at him. As much as he wanted to deny it, a seed of doubt had been planted in his mind, a seed that refused to go away. That evening, Alex found Lily sitting on the steps of the East Garden. She looked tired, her expression distant as she ran her fingers through the grass. "Lily," he said, his voice tense. She looked up at him, startled by the edge in his tone. "What is it?" Alex hesitated, the words catching in his throat. "Why did you agree to marry me?" Lily froze, her eyes narrowing. "What?" "I need to know," Alex pressed, his voice hard. "Did my father pressure you into this? Did he offer you something?" Lily stood abruptly, her face pale. "You think I did this for money?" "I don't know," Alex admitted, his voice rising. "But I need the truth." Lily's voice shook with anger. "I didn't ask for this marriage, Alex. I didn't want it. Your father gave me no choice. He secretly threatened to ruin my family if I didn't agree." Alex stared at her, shocked. "What?" Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "You think I wanted this life? To be married to someone who hated me? I agreed because I had no other option. But don't you dare accuse me of being a gold digger." Alex felt as though the ground had been ripped out from under him. He had spent so long resenting her, blaming her, but he had never once considered that she, too, had been trapped. "Lily, I didn't know." "No, you didn't," she said bitterly, stepping back. "And now I think it's better if you leave me alone." "Lily, just go, Alex." He wanted to argue, to explain himself, but the pain in her voice cut through him like a knife. So he did the one thing he swore he wouldn't do. He walked away. The silence between Alex and Lily over the next few days was deafening. The mansion, once filled with quiet moments of peace and shared laughter, now felt like a prison. Alex moved through the halls with a heavy weight in his chest, haunted by his own words and Lily's pained expression. For the first time in his life, Alex Whitmore knew he had truly hurt someone, and it wasn't someone who deserved it. Lily, on the other hand, threw herself into her work. The East Garden had become her sanctuary once more, the only place where she could pretend everything was okay. But beneath her calm exterior, her heart ached. She had begun to care for Alex, truly care, and his accusation had reopened every old wound she'd spent years trying to bury. Alex spent those days in a spiral of guilt and anger, mostly directed at himself. His father's words had planted doubt in his mind, but the look on Lily's face when she told him the truth had shattered that doubt completely. He had been a fool. One evening, Alex found himself standing in the East Garden, looking around at the beauty Lily had created. He remembered how it looked when they started, wild and untamed, much like their relationship. And now it was a place of peace and light, a reflection of Lily herself. As he stood there, his father's cruel words replayed in his head. "She doesn't belong in your world." Alex clenched his fists, anger rising in his chest. His father had manipulated him for so long, pulling strings like a puppeteer. But he was done being controlled. He couldn't change the past, but he could fight for the present. For Lily. The next morning, Alex approached Lily in the garden. She was trimming a rose bush, her movements careful and deliberate, but she didn't look up when he approached. "Lily," he said softly, "what do you want, Alex?" Her tone was flat, devoid of emotion. "I need to talk to you." Lily sighed, setting down her shears. "I don't think we have anything left to say." "We do," Alex said firmly. "Please, just hear me out." Lily crossed her arms, giving him a wary look. "Fine. I'm listening." Alex took a deep breath. "I was wrong. About everything. I let my father's words get into my head, and I doubted you when you didn't deserve it." Lily's expression softened slightly, but she said nothing. "I know now that you were just as trapped as I was," Alex continued. "Maybe more. And I hate that I made you feel like you had to defend yourself when you've done nothing but give and sacrifice." "Why are you telling me this, Alex?" Lily asked quietly. "Because I need you to know how sorry I am," Alex replied, his voice raw. "And because I don't want this to be over. I don't want to lose you." Lily looked at him, her emotions warring inside her. "How do I know this isn't just another game? Another lie?" "It's not," Alex said quickly. I'll prove it to you. I don't care how long it takes. I'll show you that I'm serious, that you can trust me." Lily studied him for a long moment, searching his face for any sign of deception. For the first time, she saw something real in Alex's eyes. Regret, sincerity, and something else. Something she wasn't ready to name. "Actions speak louder than words, Alex," she said finally. "I know," Alex replied. "And I'll show you." Later that day, Alex stormed into his father's office, determined to end the cycle of manipulation once and for all. James barely looked up from his desk. "To what do I owe this dramatic entrance?" "I'm done, Dad," Alex said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm done letting you control my life." James raised an eyebrow. "What are you talking about?" "You forced me into this marriage hoping it would teach me a lesson. But the only lesson I've learned is that you'll never stop trying to pull the strings," Alex said. "And I'm not going to let you anymore." James leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips. "And what makes you think you have a choice?" "I do have a choice," Alex shot back. "You can't control me, and you can't control Lily. She doesn't deserve the way you've treated her." James's expression darkened. "That woman is nothing, Alex. You're letting her cloud your judgment." "No," Alex said firmly. "She's shown me what matters. Something you never did. I don't care what you think. I'm not giving her up, and I'm not playing your games anymore." James's jaw tightened. "You're making a mistake." "The only mistake I made was listening to you for so long," Alex replied. "I'm done, Dad. I'll build my own future. and it won't be the one you planned for me." For the first time, James Whitmore had no response. In the following days, Alex kept his promise. He showed Lily through actions, not words, that he was serious about changing. He began working alongside her in the garden again, but this time, it wasn't out of obligation. It was because he wanted to be there. He helped her restore the last remaining patches of the garden, his attitude humble and sincere. He also made a point to check in with her, asking about her family, her dreams, and her passions. Slowly, Lily began to let her guard down, though she remained cautious. One evening, Alex surprised her with something unexpected. Lily walked into the garden to find a brand new greenhouse standing at the edge of the property. Inside were shelves of plants and flowers, gardening tools, and a small desk with a notebook and pen. "What is this?" she asked, turning to Alex, who stood nearby. "It's for you," Alex said with a small smile. "I know how much you love plants, and I wanted you to have a space that's yours." Lily stared at the greenhouse, overwhelmed. "You did this for me?" Alex nodded. "You've given so much to this place, Lily. You deserve something of your own." Lily turned to him, her eyes soft. "Thank you, Alex. This means more to me than you know." Alex smiled, his heart lifting for the first time in weeks. "You're welcome." As Lily looked back at the greenhouse, Alex knew he was finally beginning to earn her trust. That night, Lily sat on the steps of the garden, looking through the notebook Alex had left for her in the greenhouse. It was filled with notes, sketches, and plans for future projects, ideas Alex had written down for her. As she flipped through the pages, something fell out. A folded letter. Frowning, Lily picked it up and opened it. Her breath caught as she recognized James Whitmore's handwriting. The letter was dated months before their wedding, and it was addressed to Alex. "Alex, I've arranged the perfect punishment for you. The girl, Lily, will marry you, whether she wants to or not. Her family owes me a debt, and this is how they'll repay it. You'll learn your lesson, and she'll know her place." Lily's hands shook as she read the words. Her heart pounded as the truth crashed over her. James Whitmore had used her family to force the marriage, and worse, he had never planned for her to be anything more than a pawn. Tears filled her eyes as she realized what this meant. Alex might have changed, but his father had built their entire relationship on lies and manipulation, and now Lily had to decide whether she could forgive it or walk away for good. The letter felt like it was burning a hole in Lily's hands. She reread the cruel, calculated words from James Whitmore over and over again, hoping that somehow they would change, but they didn't. The truth was clear. Her family had been used, and her marriage to Alex had been orchestrated as nothing more than a punishment. Tears streamed down her cheeks as anger and betrayal crashed over her like a storm. How could James do this? How could Alex not know? Or did he know? The questions swirled in her mind, threatening to consume her. The next morning, Lily found Alex in the greenhouse, tending to a row of small potted plants. He looked up when she walked in, his face lighting up with a smile, until he saw the look on her face. "Lily, what's wrong?" he asked, concern immediately replacing his joy. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked toward him and silently handed him the letter. "What's this?" he asked, frowning as he unfolded it. "Read it," Lily said, her voice trembling with barely controlled anger. Alex's expression shifted as his eyes scanned the page. His face paled, his hands tightening around the paper. When he finished, he looked up at her, stricken. "Where did you find this?" "It fell out of the notebook you gave me," Lily said, her voice breaking. "Your father's words, Alex. This is how it all started." Alex looked devastated. "Lily, I swear I didn't know about this. I had no idea he'd done this to your family." "You didn't know?" Lily asked, her voice sharp. "How could you not? Your father arranged this, Alex. He forced my family's hand." Alex ran a hand through his hair, his expression anguished. "Lily, I was blind to a lot of things when this all started. I hated the situation, and I hated him, but I didn't know he stooped this low." Lily stared at him, her heart hammering. "How can I believe you? How do I know you're not lying?" "Because I'm telling you the truth," Alex said, his voice desperate. "I may have been a selfish, arrogant idiot, but I would never have agreed to this if I knew how much it would hurt you. I didn't choose this, Lily, and neither did you." She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for any sign of deception. All she saw was regret and pain. "I don't know if I can trust you, Alex," she whispered. "You can," Alex said firmly, stepping closer. "I know I don't deserve your trust, but I'm begging you, let me make this right. Let me fight for you." Lily's voice trembled. "I don't want to be a pawn anymore, Alex. I want my life to be my own." "It will be," Alex promised. "I'll stand up to him. I'll make sure you're free to live however you want. But Lily, I don't want to lose you. Not now. Not after everything we've been through." Lily turned away, struggling to hold herself together. She wanted to believe him, but the pain was too fresh, the betrayal too raw. "I need time, Alex," she said quietly. Alex nodded, his voice soft. "Take all the time you need. I'll wait. I'll wait as long as it takes." Later that day, Alex confronted his father once again, but this time, he wasn't just angry. He was resolute. James looked up from his desk as Alex stormed into the office, holding the crumpled letter. "Where did you find that?" James asked, his voice cold. "You really thought I wouldn't figure it out?" Alex said, his voice shaking with rage. "You used Lily's family. You forced her into this marriage as part of your sick game." James didn't flinch. "I did what was necessary." "Necessary?" Alex shouted. "You manipulated and threatened innocent people. You ruined lives just to punish me. How could you do that?" James leaned back, his expression impassive. "I did it because you needed to learn a lesson, Alex. You were reckless, irresponsible. Now look at you. This marriage has turned you into a better man, hasn't it?" Alex stared at his father in disbelief. "You don't get to take credit for that. You didn't make me a better man. Lily did. She showed me what it means to care about someone other than myself, and you tried to destroy her to prove a point." James' face darkened. "You're being naive, Alex. That girl will never belong in our world." "Maybe not," Alex shot back, "but I don't care. I don't want your world, Dad. I don't want anything to do with you anymore." James' eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake." "No," Alex said firmly. "For once, I'm doing the right thing." With that, Alex turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. Alex spent the next week trying to prove himself to Lily. He visited her family and explained everything, apologizing for what his father had done. He even arranged for their debts to be cleared, ensuring that Lily's family would no longer be under any obligation to the Whitmores. When Lily heard about what Alex had done, her walls began to crack. She saw the man he was becoming, the man who was willing to stand up to his father, fight for her, and take responsibility for the damage caused. One evening, Alex found Lily in the greenhouse. She was watering a row of flowers, her back to him. "Lily," he said softly. She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "You've been busy." Alex nodded. "I wanted to fix what my father did to your family. I wanted you to know that you're free, Lily. You don't owe anyone anything, not me, and certainly not him. You're free to leave whenever you like." Lily studied him for a moment before asking, "Why are you doing this, Alex?" "Because I love you," he said quietly. Lily froze, her heart skipping a beat. "What?" "I love you," Alex repeated, his voice steady. "I know it took me too long to see it, and I've made too many mistakes. But I love you, Lily, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving it to you, if you'll let me." Tears filled Lily's eyes as his words sank in. For so long, she had believed this marriage was a prison. But somehow, through all the pain and hardship, something real had grown between them, something neither of them had expected. "Alex," she whispered, her voice trembling. He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "I know you don't have to stay. I know you have every right to walk away. But if there's even a part of you that feels the same way I do, I want to build a life with you, Lily. Not because we have to, but because we choose to." Lily looked into his eyes and saw the truth there. This wasn't the same man she had married. Alex had changed. And against all odds, so had she. "I love you too, Alex," she whispered. Relief and joy washed over Alex's face as he pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. For the first time, they were free to love each other, free to build a life on their own terms. Lily decided not to leave but to stay with Alex, and a year later, the East Garden was in full bloom. Roses, lilies, and countless other flowers surrounded the sprawling greenhouse that had become Lily's pride and joy. Alex and Lily stood together, watching as guests gathered for the garden's grand opening. "I still can't believe you turned this into a business," Alex said with a grin. Lily smiled, her eyes shining. "It's what I love, and you helped me get here." Alex wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "I'll always be here, Lily, no matter what." She looked up at him, her heart full. "And I'll be here for you, too." Together, they walked hand in hand through the garden, a symbol of everything they had built together. What had begun as a forced marriage born out of pain and manipulation had blossomed into something real, beautiful, and lasting. And for Alex and Lily, it was only the beginning. Thank you for being part of this journey. Your support spreads hope and inspiration. If you're ready for another uplifting story, click the video on the left. And don't forget to subscribe so we can keep sharing light together. Until next time.